The train pulled into Norfolk, Virginia, January 1944, but this was no ordinary passenger train, and these were no ordinary passengers. The sleek Pullman cars were carrying a cargo that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. As the doors hissed open, hundreds of German prisoners of war stepped onto American soil for the first time. Their eyes, wide with disbelief, took in the scene. Uniformed porters moved through the aisles. The seats were upholstered, not the cold, hard benches of German troop transports. One prisoner, Reinhold Pell, would later recall, "When the colored porter came through with coffee and sandwiches and offered them to us as though we were human beings, most of us forgot those anti-American feelings that had accumulated. For months, Nazi propaganda had filled their heads with a single image of America, a decadent, weak, and broken nation. Joseph Goebbels' ministry had crafted a narrative of a country in ruins, its cities bombed flat, its people starving, its industry destroyed. They arrived expecting to find a landscape of desolation. Instead, they discovered something far more shocking than any battlefield. They discovered a country untouched by war, thriving, a nation whose industrial heart beat with an unstoppable rhythm. The first sight of this reality wasn't a bomb crater or a factory. It was a simple train ride. So how did 425,000 German prisoners of war, captured across the battlefields of Europe and North Africa, come to witness firsthand the true might of American industrial capacity? And how did this revelation transform not only their understanding of the war they had been fighting, but ultimately the fate of democracy itself? The year was 1943. General Erwin Rommel's vaunted Afrika Korps lay defeated in the North African desert. Over 130,000 elite German soldiers found themselves prisoners of war. Many were hardened veterans, men who had swept across France and terrorized the British. Now, they were on their way to a new kind of prison. As they crossed the Atlantic on the same Liberty ships that were a symbol of America's industrial miracle, they still believed in German victory. The journey was filled with an almost arrogant certainty. They had been told that New York City was a pile of rubble. They had been assured the American war machine was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Their first real taste of the truth came not on a battlefield, but on that train platform. Sergeant Hans Wacker, an Afrika Korps veteran, would never forget stepping aboard that Pullman car. In Germany, soldiers traveled in cramped, cold boxcars, cattle cars. Here, American guards were ordering them to sit in upholstered seats, to leave empty seats between them. It was a level of luxury so foreign, it was almost an insult. They were seeing with their own eyes the lie they had been sold. This wasn't a broken country, it was the most powerful industrial machine the world had ever seen. The journey had just begun, and with every mile, another layer of Nazi propaganda would be peeled away. This was their first shock, and it would change everything. As the trains rolled deeper into the American heartland, the prisoners pressed their faces to the windows. What they saw defied comprehension. They had been told of a country in ruins. Instead, they saw something that no amount of propaganda could explain away. They saw cities untouched by bombing, their skylines gleaming in the distance. They witnessed industrial complexes stretching for miles, smokestacks belching a constant plume of production. They observed a countryside abundant with food, while their own homeland faced desperate shortages. But it wasn't just the scale that amazed them. It was the quality. The rations for prisoners were the same as those for their American guards, and they were better than what many Germans had known even before the war. One prisoner would later write home, "When I was captured, I weighed 128 pounds. After 2 years as an American POW, I weighed 185. I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes." The Industrial Revolution came in waves. Many prisoners were assigned to work on American farms and in factories as part of the war effort. This labor program employed tens of thousands of German POWs across the country, and what they discovered there shattered their understanding of American industrial capacity. They worked alongside American civilians in factories that operated with a scale and efficiency that dwarfed anything in Germany. They witnessed assembly lines producing aircraft, vehicles, and weapons at rates that seemed impossible. The Germans had prided themselves on their engineering and industrial might. Now, they were seeing their own nation's capabilities exposed as a fraction of America's. What they saw was a production process that was both immense and incredibly efficient. The factories were clean, well-lit, and humming with activity. There were no armed SS guards forcing them to work. The system was driven by American ingenuity and a civilian workforce. They saw that this production was happening not despite the war, but because of American organizational genius. David Rathben, who worked with German POWs on his family's South Dakota farm, remembered the early prisoners as a real cocky bunch from Rommel's elite Afrika Korps. These men, captured early in the war, refused to believe what Americans told them. Some even claimed that New York City had been bombed flat, dismissing all evidence to the contrary. But reality has a way of overwhelming propaganda. As these prisoners lived and worked in America, their certainties began to crumble. They weren't seeing propaganda, they were living the truth of American industrial supremacy. The transformation had begun. The transformation of German prisoners from believers in Nazi propaganda to witnesses of American industrial might created an unexpected opportunity. How do you rebuild a democratic Germany? The answer came not from diplomatic negotiations or military occupation, but from the lived experience of over 400,000 German soldiers. The POW camps transformed from simple prisons into an accidental classroom. The American prisoner of war program, guided by the Geneva Convention, became an inadvertent democracy-building exercise. Prisoners attended classes at American universities, eventually studying through over 100 different institutions. They published their own newspapers, staged theatrical productions, and participated in debate societies. The education wasn't confined to classrooms. These men experienced daily life in a functioning democracy. They witnessed the everyday realities that were completely alien to their rigid upbringing under the Third Reich. Theodor Gintz, a former prisoner who worked on farms in South Dakota, would later reflect on his democratic education. People in town were on strike because the price of overalls had been raised a few cents, he recalled. That was unthinkable to us that the workers would strike, and I realized that this was only possible in a democracy. This democratic education was equally powerful within the camps. German officers, accustomed to rigid hierarchies, were required to salute American officers as equals. They witnessed American guards treating them with dignity and respect, even when those guards were from minority backgrounds that Nazi ideology had taught them to despise. But this experience revealed uncomfortable truths about both nations. While American treatment of prisoners was generally exemplary, it highlighted glaring contradictions in American society. German prisoners often noted the irony that they could eat in restaurants and use facilities where African American citizens were forbidden. Some Nazi hardliners used this hypocrisy to mock American claims about fighting for democracy and freedom. The sight of German POWs enjoying privileges denied to black Americans exposed the hollow nature of America's democratic rhetoric for its own citizens. The Special Projects Division, a secret re-education program, attempted to deprogram Nazi ideology among the prisoners. Its mixed results highlighted the difficulty of combating deeply ingrained propaganda. Hardcore Nazis, often the early captures from Rommel's elite corps, sometimes murdered fellow prisoners suspected of collaboration, leading to the execution of 14 Germans by American authorities. Yet, these dark episodes were overshadowed by a larger truth. The American POW program succeeded in ways its architects never intended. It created a generation of Germans who had witnessed firsthand the prosperity and freedom possible under a democratic, capitalist system. The seeds of a new Germany were being sown, not in a schoolbook, but through a lived, powerful experience. By Christmas Day 1944, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. While the Battle of the Bulge raged in the snowy Ardennes, German prisoners gathered around pianos in American POW camps. They sang carols alongside American guards and local families who had invited them for dinner. This small act of shared humanity, repeated thousands of times across the American landscape, represented something no amount of military might could achieve: the conversion of enemies into allies through simple decency. When the last German prisoner was repatriated in 1946, they returned to a homeland in ruins. Cities lay flattened by Allied bombing, industry was destroyed, and millions of Germans faced starvation. The contrast with the America they had just left was staggering. Gerd Cruz, an Afrika Korps artilleryman, captured the sentiment of many returning prisoners, stating, "When I set foot on German soil and saw what happened, I just as soon turned around, but they didn't turn back. Instead, they became the foundation upon which post-war German democracy was built." The 425,000 German prisoners who had witnessed American industrial might and democratic freedom were not defeated enemies. They were witnesses to a different way of organizing a society. Their experience with American generosity and prosperity helped build public support for the Marshall Plan, the massive aid program that reconstructed Western Europe. They had arrived as enemies, convinced by propaganda that America was weak and divided. They returned as living proof that democratic societies, for all their flaws and contradictions, possessed an industrial and organizational capacity that authoritarian regimes could never match. The industrial education they received proved invaluable. These former prisoners became the skilled workers, managers, and leaders who transformed West Germany into an economic powerhouse. They had seen American workers strike for better conditions, yet still produce at unprecedented levels. They had witnessed the messy, contentious, and sometimes inefficient process of democracy, and understood that this apparent chaos was actually a source of tremendous strength. For some, the change was so profound they returned to America. Hans Veit, a former prisoner, eventually became a citizen of the country that had once held him captive. Freda Gudos, whose husband Heinrich had been a prisoner, would later establish a successful business in America and reflect, "You can do it here in America. I think that is the only place you can do it." The luxury Pullman cars that had carried them to prison camps in 1943 delivered more than prisoners to American soil. They delivered the future leaders, workers, and citizens who would help build a new, democratic Germany. The numbers tell only part of the story. By war's end, America had accomplished what seemed impossible. They had produced over 5,000 cargo ships, with a new ship launching every single day at the peak of production. They had built 124 aircraft carriers when the war began with only 8. 200,000 combat aircraft rolled off assembly lines, along with 100,000 armored vehicles and 2.5 million trucks. German POWs witnessed this industrial miracle firsthand. They worked in the factories that produced these weapons. They loaded the ships that carried supplies to Europe. They harvested the food that fed American soldiers and prisoners alike. Most importantly, they saw that this incredible output wasn't achieved through slave labor or brutal coercion, but through the organized effort of free citizens working toward a common goal. In the end, the greatest weapon in America's arsenal wasn't its factories, its ships, or its planes. It was the simple power of allowing its enemies to see the truth. The German prisoners had mocked America at first, certain that Nazi propaganda had revealed the weakness of their democratic enemy, but in witnessing the reality of American industrial might married to democratic freedom, they discovered something more powerful than any Wehrmacht division or Luftwaffe squadron. They discovered the irresistible force of a free society at war. The story of the German prisoners in America reveals a profound lesson. It's a testament to the power of human decency and the quiet, persistent strength of a democratic system. It shows that the best way to fight tyranny isn't just with military force, but by providing a living example of a better way to live. The German prisoners had arrived as enemies, brainwashed by a totalitarian regime. They left as witnesses to a different truth. The trains that carried them across America didn't just transport prisoners. They carried the seeds of post-war democracy. And in that journey from propaganda to truth, from certainty to revelation, lay the foundation of the world we know today. Their experience with a nation that showed compassion and organizational genius helped build a new Germany, a Germany that would become a beacon of democracy and economic stability. The lesson endures. The most powerful weapon against tyranny isn't military force. It's the simple act of showing people what freedom can accomplish when citizens work together toward a common goal.